3rd of January, Rabbi Furst, with the Avos Embalming.
Okay, very good. Here we are, right, as Lou mentioned, this is Rabbi Shlomo Furst here in Yerushalayim, Yeshiva Savas Nafshi, care of Zoom. We are learning, a separate topic temporarily, the embalming of Yaakov Avinu. We're learning the Mishnah Halachas and his development of the questions that have to be dealt with in understanding the embalmment of Yaakov Avinu. So that will bring us to, I think we were going to restart paragraph 6, if I'm not mistaken, correct? Yeah. Okay, so let's start it again. Again, we have two. The beginning of paragraph 6 is now going to try and reach a compromise between. We have two statements. One, we have the actual psukim that mention about the embalmment and the hespedim and the burial, which the Torah itself goes into detail about describing these events in relationship to Yaakov Avinu, which apparently indicate that he was in fact no longer with the living, and he's passed on to the next world, Olam Haba. And nevertheless, in the Gemara, there's a statement by Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan makes a statement in the Gemara in Tainus, as that we can refer to paragraph 4 to see that again if you like. That Rabbi Yochanan says Yaakov Avinu lo meis, and in fact there the Gemara Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak did in fact ask from the psukim that indicate that in fact Yaakov Avinu was nifta. So now we're going to try and understand things through the means of a third source. That's what he means by here in the beginning of the first sentence in paragraph number 16. Lamdenu kan shnei devarim echad Yaakov Avinu echad bo. So now he's going to go and based on paragraph 5, he's going to explain how we can try and explain both things. Okay, paragraph number 6, if you like. Who would like to begin reading?
I would.
Okay, please go ahead if you like.
והנה, למדנו כאן שני דברים. חדה, ליעקב אבינו לאחר.
Lou, you're not too close to your mic, where it's a hard time hearing you.
Let's see, Mike. How's that? Is that better?
Much better, thank you.
Yes.
Okay. So let's see, where was I? We learned two things. The first one is that Yaakov L'achar bo'o the Eretz Yisrael, that after he came to Eretz Yisrael, Kavar Harbe Zaman La'achar HaChanata. He was there a long time after he was embalmed. Pesach.
Right, when Yaakov Avinu was finally brought after 70 days to Eretz Yisrael, so that was a long time. That was the 7 days after his embalmment process began, right?
Right.
And nevertheless, as we saw in paragraph number 5, as we saw, nevertheless,
that he was glad.
well, he opened his eyes. Nevertheless, after 70 days of embalmment, nevertheless, he opened his eyes, Besacha, and he was gladdened.
Al Sarah Nikma Bisono, to see the vengeance of his enemy.
Right, when Yaakov Avinu, when the eyes of Esav, or the head of Esav, was deposited upon him when he was on his mita, in his casket, and Esav's head or eye and eyes landed on him. So Yaakov Avinu opened his eyes, and he was very gladdened over the vengeance that was taken against his enemy. Esav was the enemy of Yaakov to his very last moment. At his very last moment in life, he was opposing the burial of Yaakov Avinu. He stood in the way. He was interfering with the funeral procession and the burial process of Yaakov Avinu. That's what Cushim ben Dan objected to very strongly. So much so that, as we learned in paragraph 5, he took a mallet and walloped him in the head, knocked his eyes out, and as Tos mentions in the Gemara in Gittin, and Yehuda came and finished the job by slicing off his head. So Esav, to his very last moment in life, was hating and hateful of Yaakov Avinu. And therefore Yaakov Avinu opened his eyes, realizing that, and was very happy that his arch enemy was now got his just deserts. Okay, let's continue on.
Interesting twist that you're putting on it, Rabbi.
What do you mean? Go ahead.
Well, one could argue Esau didn't hate Yaakov, he just wanted his rights. He wanted to be buried in Machpelah. He wasn't
Well, I mean,
out of spite. He wasn't saying, I don't want you to bury Yaakov there. He was saying, I do want you to bury me there. We can't both be there.
he was lying. He knew he sold it to him.
Well, he regretted it.
He was a rush. He was a rush. That doesn't matter. You sold your house and you regret it. So you're gonna interfere with the person moving in. You're a person like that's a rush. Esav was a Russia to the very last moment in his life.
The other thing is it proper for Yaakov to be happy?
100%. That's the pasuk in Tehillim. That was the pasuk in Tehillim. It's very definitely so. He has a full right to be happy over the death and destruction of the Rishayim. He has a very full right, absolute mitzvah deraisa, to be happy over the destruction of the Rishayim.
So why is there so much suffering at the hands of the offspring of Esau?
They hate us. Esav passed that tradition onto his offspring. That didn't stop.
Why does Hashem empower Esau? I mean, Esau could hate us.
That's only if we're not.
Unsuccessful.
That we know that's a very well-known rule. The rule in Ruk is Kol Kol Yaakov Yadayim Yaday Esav. There's a balance that the Kadosh Baruch Hu created in this world. That if there's a lack of Torah and mitzvahs in the world, so then there's a corresponding increase of evil in the world. So we have our ways of protecting ourselves, and we have to make use of the ways of protecting ourselves. If we don't, we're at fault for ourselves.
Okay. Gam nis kayama nevios Rivka lama eshkol gam shnechem v'halo Yaakov Mace. Also, it establishes the prophecy of Rivka when she said, "Why should I be bereaved of both of them? Is it not that Yaakov died?" So maybe we have another hint as to
Well,
why.
you stopped in the middle of the sentence here. Once you try and read the complete thought. Because V'gam this
Kama Chadashim Kodem b'Mitzrayim. Many months before he arrived in Mitzrayim.
right. So the question here is when we say it was Miskayim, the Nevuah of Rivka, that the prophecy of Rivka was fulfilled now at this point. The question is, and what was that Nevuah? Lama Eshkal Gam Shneim. Why should I be bereaved for both of them in the same day? The question is, was it not Yaakov Meis Kama Chadashim Kodem LeMitzrayim? Was not that Yaakov Avinu was nifter many months previously beforehand in Mitzrayim? Right, so Esav didn't die on the same day as Yaakov did. So how can this be considered a fulfillment of the prophecy of Rivka?
Ella
So,
came to Yaakov.
Ella al korchach. Ella, rather, it must be al korchach. It must be.
Rather, it must be that Yaakov did not die. Ella se Kevan se biyom hazeh nis nohu Ma'ara biyom shemes bo Esav niskayama nivo sa. Okay, so let's try and translate. Rather, we're forced to say that Yaakov did not die. Rather, that since on that day, where's this word nis no ho?
That al korchach, we must say that Yaakov lo meis. Yaakov was not mace. Ella, rather, Kevan shebiyom hazeh nisnavu, that he was put into. So from no tain, from Nasan, this Nasnav, they had put him in. They had put him in the mire. They had put him into the cave. On that day, they put him into the cave. Meaning, on the day that Esav was killed, Yaakov was put into the cave.
Into the cave on the day that he died.
In the day that Esav died.
Shemes bo Esav. Esav died. Niskayama nevu asa lama shech ashkol gam shnechem b'yom b'yom. And this establishes the prophecy. Why should I be bereaved of both of them on one day?
Right. So let's try and clarify that. That again, the question is that Rivka had the prophecy that both Esav and Yaakov would die on the same day, and nevertheless, we see that Yaakov's apparent passing from the world took place in Mitzrayim 70 days plus to that of the death of Esav. But we do see, so that's difficult to say that that's what the Nebu was referring to. But we do see that at the day that Esav was killed, that was the day that Yaakov was placed into the Maras Machpelah. So therefore, that is considered to be a fulfillment of the prophecy of Rivka that she would be bereaved, right? It says bereaved. I mean, the prophecy is that that she would be bereaved for both of them on the same day, meaning not necessarily that they both died on the same day, but her bereavement would take place on the same day, and so therefore the death and burial of Esav took place on the same day that Yaakov's burial took place, and that would be the day that the bereavement process would begin, because in general the person until the nifter is buried, Avelis doesn't start until the nifter is buried, and until then, the relatives are in what we call a state of being an oining. And oining is pater from many of the mitzvahs of the Torah, and is a state of aninus, is a limbo state between the death of the person who passed on and his actual burial. In general, the way it should be done is the death and the burial should be done on the same day, which that's how it took place for Esav. His death took place on the same day of his burial. But with Yaakov, we're not even attempting to say right now that he died, but his burial, let's say, just put his burial was on the same day of the death and burial of Esav, which would technically be a fulfillment of the statement of Rivka, the prophecy of Rivka, that they should be bereaved. She would start a process of being an oval of Avelis on the same day for both of them. So that's an answer to that particular question. Okay.
And that's what it means when it says Shebiyom Echad Nikbaru. On one day they were buried.
Right, on that self same day they were both buried together, right, at that time, right, and that would be a fulfillment of let's put it this way, that would be a sufficient fulfillment of the prophecy.
Over Mitzrayim Shekavar Shakav Yaakov Lo Mikre Misa Klal. And in Egypt, that Yaakov was laid to rest. Lo does not written that he died at all. Rak Bishas Kavuras Esav. Only at the time of the burial of Esav, Shahas Kava, that he was laid to rest, the Menuchas Abinu, for the resting of our father Yaakov, l'chaim, for life. I don't know what this abbreviation is.
That's l'chaim ba'olam haba, right? It's that that we see that in Mitzrayim, Yaakov was laid to rest, and that's not called Misa at all. Rak b'shas kavuras Esav, only at the time of the burial of Esav, v'shchavcha lemenuchas avinu Yaakov l'chai olam haba, v'Esav ledarko, and that was at the time of their burial that Esav was buried on that day, and Yaakov Avinu, however, was laid to rest for his rest in Olam Haba, and his rest in the life of Olam Haba. The Esav Ladarko. Esav went to his way, not obviously not a Chaim Olam Haba.
Ella de'im kain mivo ar deha chata sham lo haisa kamo she'omrim hamifarshim de'im lekhu mimenu chas v'sholom. So rather, accordingly, it explains that the embalming there was not like that they say in the explanation that they took from him chas v'sholom hamoach v'halev v'ha b'nei me'ayim the nishar, but they took from him chas v'sholom his brain and his heart, his liver, his intestines, and his and other things.
But when Nishar Ke'evin Doimim, and he remained there as a inanimate stone. So that's what he's explaining here now. That again, because one of the original questions that he's dealing with is that according to the some Mefarshim, they were explained that the embalmment process that Yaakov underwent in Mitzrayim was the same as they traditionally did with the Egyptian kings, royalty, nobility, which would be involved in a removal of the brain, the heart, the other internal organs, and that would leave him as a inanimate stone. But that's has v'sholom. That's not going to be that. You can't say that explanation. Why? Hey, if it would be like that, if he was Nishar Kevin Daimim, we would be left with just as a inanimate stone, as the normal traditional embalmment process of Egyptian royalty would call for. Hey, how?
Uvama, and with what ro'eh did he see o petach einav, that he opened his eyes? How could it be that he opened his eyes? Lishchok ma'asav, to laugh, what is ma'asav?
To laugh over Esav, the lischok me'esav.
Me'esav.
Yeah, how would meaning if everything was removed from him, so how would he in the world would he be able to see, and then what would he see, and where was his eyes that he opened up, and what would he be able to laugh over the death of Esau?
V'ha eyach hagei ad yom shemes Esav v'lo niskayim eskol shnehem v'havein. And how is it that he could live until the day that he died, that Esav died, and not fulfill being bereaved of both of them. What is Vahaben?
Well, having and so he says so understand this. I mean, you'll need to think into this a little bit. But if you think into this a little bit, having it'll be understood. So his proof is that in order that if as it is said that the prophecy of Rivka was in fact fulfilled, right? So you have to say that Yaakov Avinu was alive at the time that Esau was killed. And if you say that Yaakov Avinu was alive at the time Esau was killed, so you have to say that the embalming process which took place on Yaakov Avinu was not the traditional royal embalming process of the Egyptians. It was something else which did not involve a removal of his internal organs.
V'ayin be Yarus.
Yoris Ayin Yoris Devash. That's a safe, if I'm not mistaken, Rabbi Yaakov Emden.
Ah, that's a book. Okay. What is Chet Bet?
That's Chelik Beis, the second volume, Dorish Drasha number 7, Zion.
Okay. To be a kav that it explains Chanato Gam. What is Chanato?
That the embalmment, right? That he's in the Yaris Devash over there in these two places, in his drushes and also in Shilas and Shuvas. He says over there the Biyako Chantu Gam B'Menei Ayun, that Yaakov was embalmed together along with his internal organs.
All right. So, in other words, the theory at this point is that the embalming didn't kill him. He was given some kind of medical treatment, but he was still alive the whole time.
Right. Apparently so, according to this, yeah.
Ube samuch nidavar od mizeh. And this is close to another thing.
Well, with some and it's he's telling you can some to rely. He's telling you can rely on this.
You can rely on this analysis. So I want to say a side point. I haven't given up totally on my argument. Why is Rivka bereaved of both of them? Rivka knew all about Esau. She knew he was wicked. She was the one that orchestrated the stealing of the bracha. She told Yaakov to go do it. So why is she bereaved? Because somebody dies. Your son dies. It's a sad thing.
Let me just add to what you want to say. It's not simply a sad thing. It's when a tzaddik is niftar. I mean, it's actually a good thing for the tzaddik. He's going to his eternal reward, right? And we're actually happy that the tzaddik is going to his eternal reward. A person leaves this world if he's fulfilled his purpose in life. So that's a great source of joy. Rivka, I would say that she was bereaved not over the death of Esav, but over the death of him that he didn't do tshuva, that he was a very terrible Russia, and is the worst thing that a person can have to deal with is the thought of uh, a child uh, not fulfilling his tafkid in life, and even being worse than that, being a Russia. So she was bereaved that Esav never was able to do tshuva. We see the Ishmael. We see that the Torah itself gives testimony to Ishmael in the end. Ishmael did in fact do tshuva. Whereas Esav, we see clearly there's absolutely no indication of that whatsoever. At the very last moment, he was opposing Yaakov Avinu instead of trying to. The whole purpose of Esav in this world was in order to be an assistant, like the Yisachar Zavulun, to assist Yaakov Avinu in Yaakov Avinu's learning Torah and doing mitzvahs. And Esav was supposed to supply him with all his physical needs and provide for Yaakov Avinu's spiritual growth, and therefore Esav would have a partnership in the spiritual accomplishments of Yaakov Avinu, which would be great for both of them. But Esav, that's when he sold it before. He sold that. He was interested in that, and Esav, to his very day, he died in a state of being evil, and so
You there, Rabbi?
What? Excuse me. Hello.
Hello?
Hello. Do you hear me?
I'm not hearing you. Something's wrong with my system.
Okay. Does anyone else hear me?
Okay.
Yes,
I
I
hear
can
you.
hear you.
I hear you, yeah.
Oh, okay.
I
So,
I'm sorry, something cut off. I didn't hear the last couple sentences.
right. So basically, Rivka was in bereavement over the fact that Esav never did tshuva, that he died in Russia, which is that's the real mourning that a person has to go through. There was, I forgot exactly who. There's one of the Rishonim. I'm not sure which one of the Rishonim. The Rishonim with the halacha is that if there's if a person goes off the derech, he's parsh medarki etzibur. The Rambam brings this down. It's brought down in Shulchan Aruch, if I'm not mistaken as well. That if a person goes off the derech, then there's no mourning for the person. You don't mourn for the person if he's parsh from darchi at tzibur. He doesn't keep Torah and mitzvahs, so there's no necessity at all of mourning for the person. However, there was a rishon that one of his children did in fact go very far from Torah and mitzvahs, and upon the death of the child, this particular rishon, I forgot which one it was. They can look it up if you want, but not now. He actually did sit shiva. He did sit shiva and then engaged in mourning. So his explanation was he's not mourning over the death, over the loss of the child, but he's mourning over the fact that the child never did tshuva. That's the real mourning that you have to mourn for. When a person who's far from Torah and mitzvahs dies, there is a element aspect of mourning for such a person because they didn't use their time in this world properly, and they didn't even at the very last moments of death, they didn't even pull out of it to do even a slight amount of tshuva at the very end. So that's something which is proper, according to this opinion of the Rishon here, is proper to do. So Rivka also, I'm sure she regretted bitterly the fact that Esav did not turn out to be what he could have been. And so that's how I would explain her disconsternation and distress over the fact that Esav was unfortunately evil to the very last moment.
So
Can you speak loud enough?
that's what I'm suggesting was lacking when Yaakov Avinu opened his eyes and he was happy. He should have been thinking, what a shame that Esav didn't do tshuva like his mother.
Maybe, or maybe he did, but we're not told about that. With the pasuk in Tehillim, the Medrash is telling us what he was happy about. He was happy that Esav was finally finished. As what the Gemara in the Sanhedrin says, when the Rishoyim were destroyed, we're supposed to be happy over the destruction of the Rishoyim. So if there was an aspect of regret in the mind, in the heart of Yaakov, maybe there was. Most likely there was, but that wasn't the primary point we need to know about.
Okay.
Until the age of 13, the two boys were very similar, and you couldn't tell the difference. So Rivka might have said what potential he had that he wasted. I remember once I was at a shiva in a frat. Robert Wistrom was there, and the father who died was a gangster, and the son asked, "How can I mourn for him?" And Robert Wistrom said, "You don't mourn for him; you mourn for what he could have been." Yeah,
exactly. Very good. Yeah, that's right.
But to a certain extent, that's always the case. When a good person dies, also we can argue we shouldn't mourn. He's going to Olam Haba. We should be happy. But we're sad because whatever potential he had to do more is lost. We're sad at the loss of that potential.
and also because we're missing him. Your father dies, and he's say he was a righteous person, and he's going to Olam Haba, but then you're saying, "But I miss my father."
Oh, a lot of people, the author from Kelm explains that really most people don't realize the true mitzvah and intention of what Avelis is supposed to be about. The mourning period, right? See, we get confused because we confuse the mitzvah. We have a mitzvah of nichum avelim, that they comfort the mourners, right? That's our. We have a mitzvah of being nichum avelim, of comforting the mourners. But the mourners, their mourning and process is a process which is to benefit the nifter. Their mourning is supposed to be a balance between the suffering that the nifter is going through now that they've left this world. They've left this world, a temporary physical world, and now they're entering into the spiritual world. And now there's a series of checks and balances that has to be corrected based on the accomplishments or lack of accomplishments that the person did not do during the time it was in Olam Hazeh. So the author from Kelm explains that the mourning is that we are supposed to relate in some way to the suffering that the neshama is going through during the course of basically the 12 months that every neshama has to go through, a basic 12-month cleansing period of judgments and sufferings that have to take place in all ways that we can't really understand, but that we know that there are judgments and sufferings that are taking place. So our mourning of the people who are mourning is a association, a connection with that suffering that the nifter is going through. Meaning, it's not appropriate that, for example, a person's relative his neshama is going through a terrible state of suffering, and we should be joyous at that time. Right? It's not appropriate. So therefore, we go through various different behaviors and customs and laws that are expressions and limitations of our joy during the time of the 7 days of Avelis, the 30 days, and then the whole year if it's for parents, right? And through that, our suffering through the observance of the mourning period is also beneficial to the niftar, that it's a part of a kapora. Any suffering that one of the Avelim go through during the course of the period of Avelis is credited as a suffering on the part of the neshama, that it's going through these things, and it actually takes away and cleanses the neshama in ways that only Kadosh Baruch Hu understands how to balance these things. So the Alter Rebbe says we really don't understand the proper approach and purpose of mourning. Of course, the people who are relatives of the one who's passed on miss him, and it's a loss that they suffer. And we obviously are most poignantly disturbed and upset and in distress over the loss of the relative. But as it is, the spiritual aspect, right? That's not a spiritual aspect. That loss that we're suffering is a physical loss of the person. He's no longer with us. That person's no longer with us in this life. And we miss just that person's influence, his friendship, his love, whatever, his benefits that we gained from him, right? So we miss that. So that's like, the Gemara in Brachas. Persons is discussing this point about mourning. Persons in mourning. So as I mentioned, that the persons in mourning is an oine, right? He's putter from you can't say kriyishma, doesn't have to say brachas. He's putter for various different reasons. Not going to go into that right now. So the Gemara asked the question. Well, let's say a person's had a ship with all his invested goods and merchandise on a ship, and it goes down in sea. All his whole fortune and all the efforts he's been putting into loading a ship laden with all kinds of things, and it goes down, sunk in the sea. Should he be in a state of Avelis? So you see that the Gemara understands the loss is a physical loss, which is true. We have a physical loss of a person, is a human being that was amongst us, and he in various different ways he influenced us, benefited us. We enjoyed his company, the love, all these various different things. But those are all physical things. If you look at it, there may be some aspects of ruchnius, some aspects of spiritual loss there, but primarily I would say that the loss we're experiencing is a physical loss, right? So, but that's not any comparison of what the neshama is going through. The suffering and distress that person's neshama is going through now in the spiritual worlds. It's well known. I've mentioned this several times, not recently, but the Alter from Kelm in Kelm, as you may know, Kelm was not such a very big village. It was a village in Central Europe. Sometimes it was in Poland, sometimes it was Russia, sometimes in Lithuania. With all their fights and going with the Milchamas, it changed borders back and throw. So in any event, it was at one point it was in the hands of the Russians, and the Russian Tsar had the main street. Kelm was a village located along one of the main roads going from here to there, and where in Russia. And so the Tsar had commanded that the road be cobblestone. So he had prisoners from one of the prisons, and they were out there working with their ball and chains and handcuffs, and they were cobblestoning the road. So it was said that the Alter from Kelm, when he would walk along that road, he said, "How can a person be happy when a person walks on these cobblestones and thinks about all the suffering that those prisoners had to go through to build this road?" That's one point about that road. Secondly, there was a well-known event that took place. The Alter from Kelm was walking with his Talmidim one day, and along this road, and approaching them over the horizon down the road was a funeral of a Polish peasant. You can imagine what the accomplishments of a Polish peasant were in his life. Whatever Polish peasants did with their lives, he probably did it mahadrin lil mahadrin. And so he was now going to his final resting place, and there was a levaya, a funeral of this Polish peasant. So it was approaching them. So as it approached closer and closer, at one point the altar of Tem was walking, and he stopped as the procession passed by, and he let it pass by, and it went further down on the road, and he kept standing in his spot. And he was standing there for a while and a little bit more longer, and even longer than anyone would have expected him to stand there. And he was standing there quite a long time. So finally, at one point, the altar started to walk down the road again, proceeding in his way as he started to work. And the Talmidim asked him that, say, Rebbe, I understand, you can't just walk by as if you're ignoring a funeral procession. It's not nice, so you stopped. But then you stayed there a little bit longer, and even a longer time, and much, much longer than everyone would ever dreamed it was necessary to stay there. Why did you stop such a long time? The funeral procession had passed long out of sight, and he was still there. So he explained to them he was trying to understand and feel for the suffering of that Polish peasant's soul that was going through the abrupt and terrible reality of living a life of sheker and now entering the world of emes. That the whole life of a Polish peasant, you can understand the whole life of sheker that it lived in a world of complete gashmias, and now it's approaching the world of emes, and you can understand maybe some way he was trying to understand, feel for that soul, that transition that the soul was going through in a transition from a world of sheker to a world of emes. So the tremendous sorrow, the distress that we're supposed to have in our Velis is that you're understanding the several terrible suffering that the soul goes through from living a life of sheker to living a life and now entering the life in the world of truth. And so if that goes for a Polish peasant and the distress that the Alfreds from Kelm had over the passing of a Polish peasant, we can certainly understand the distress that Rivka would have over the passing of Esav, who lived a life of sheker and now is entering the world of emes. Can certainly understand the distress that she was feeling and experiencing. So that's bereaved, that she was bereaved, and with good reason. With good reason, should be bereaved. That here her son, a mother puts tremendous efforts and energies into the success and of her son, and if he fails in his accomplishments life, that's something to be very, very seriously disturbed about. So yeah. Okay, I think we've gone well over time. Let's see, where are we? We're beginning paragraph 7.
Right.
Do you have any other questions that concerning you at this point, Brew, on this last paragraph?
No, that was a very good explanation. It's complicated. There are multiple different things that factors that go into this process of dealing with a death of a person, whether the person's a Rasha or a tzaddik. There are aspects that are going to make you happy and aspects that are going to make you sad, and it requires a lot of balancing. So it was helpful to hear your explanation.
Okay, so thank you. I mean, yeah, it's definitely, it should not be, it's not a one-dimensional thing. It's multi-dimensional. There's no doubt that there's complexities involved.
Something to think about.
Yeah. Okay, Basuras Toivos, we should have good news for everyone. And let's take a little break. We'll start the Mr. Shir in a few minutes, Mr. Shep.
Okay, thank you, Rabbi.
Okay.
Yeshkaya, hello.
Baruch Tiyeh, Meir.